Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the latest look back at Talking Heads. Topics for discussion on the programme this week included an increase in the tax cap, the return of Missile of Man, and humanitarian aid for Syrian refugees. Here's Stu Peters with more.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
Were you disappointed by a lack of reform in yesterday's budget? The debate that followed the budget announcement took up most of Tynwald's 9-hour sitting. 26 members stood up to air their views and raise their concerns, but in the end the Pink Book was voted through unanimously by the court. But there were criticisms of some aspects of the budget during the debate. The main voice of opposition was from East Douglas MHK Chris Robertshaw, formerly Minister for Policy and Reform. While he praised much in what he referred to as a commendable first budget, he was less impressed by the lack of progress towards a slimmer and smarter government. Would you like to have seen more reform of government addressed in the budget, or are you happy that that wasn't the focus of the budget? It was looking at the numbers rather than the rest of it. I think it's just been one of those budgets where they've moved things around. I don't know that there are any real big changes, although they are proclaiming that, biggest changes in 20 years or whatever. I'm not convinced by that, but you may be. I might be completely wrong about this. I often am. First comment goes to Josh. He says, how long has Mr. Robertshaw been in Tynwald? He's like a broken record going on and on about the same things. Get on and put up or shut up, Mr. Robertshaw. You've been in long enough. Actions, no more empty words. Well, he would probably say that that's exactly what he's doing because, like I say, he was Policy and Reform Minister, wasn't he? And he resigned from that position because he thought he could influence things more as a backbencher rather than being within a government that seemed reluctant to accept any changes. So he would say that that's exactly what he's trying to do. And he is one of the few voices that's spoken against the budget so far. What did you think about it, though? Do you think that there are any benefits to it? I'll tell you one of the things that I noticed, and I mean, it's not a new figure, but it showed just how much the government spends of its annual revenue on staff costs, and it's something like a third. So £1 in every £3 that's taken in by government every year goes on staff costs. That's too much. Surely that's too much. I mean, we're talking about the same amount or more than is spent on health and social care, for example, and other areas of government. So I think I saw that in one of the reports that came through yesterday, one of the news reports, and I just thought, wow, I'd not realised that it was that much. Don't know about you. Hi Stu, some pensioners will lose out. This is from Norman. The allowance up £2,000, but age allowance of £1,000 abolished. The 10% rate allowance is being reduced, so some of us will pay more if we have an additional pension from a former employer. Rates have also gone up. Okay. Just because Mr. Robertshaw didn't get what he wanted in the budget, no need to throw his toys out of the pram. I don't think he's doing that, is he? Wasn't he wanting to spend big money on a database, keeping everyone's details in one place? Asks Dave. That rings a bell. Stu, if Chris Robertshaw wants a smaller government, why doesn't he stand down from being an MHK and as regard mean testing? All they have to do is to ask the income tax people. They know exactly how much people earn, says John. Yes, I think it's all down to do with data security and all the rest of it. Certain things they can swap information on. I don't know whether or not they could do in that case. But means testing, I think, is a perfect way to make sure that things go to the places that they're needed. It would make much more sense to me. Government is in essence a service organisation, so the largest cost will be the people who provide the services, i.e. staff costs. Yes, I can't help thinking that there are too many staff there doing too many things that I sometimes think, that we're so keen to prove that we're an independent nation and we do our own thing and that we're employing people that we don't really need, because generally speaking what we do is that we cut and paste UK legislation. We usually take initiatives and things from the UK in terms of health and safety and all those things. We tend to take all those things from the UK and just stick Isle of Man in instead of UK in the literature, yet we're employing people to sort of manage those situations. I just think it's a waste of money and probably time, personally. But that's maybe just me. You might disagree. More comments from you. Chris Robertshaw makes some good points. Means testing is needed. Glad we adopted the sugar tax to tackle growing problem of obesity. Okie dokie. One from Mark, and he says, once again, the pension hole was not addressed. The civil servants still refuse to acknowledge what the rest of us out here in the real world have had to live with for a long time. Final salary pensions are fundamentally unsustainable. No investment will deliver the dividend that can support the payouts that the subscribers are promised. Most recently, Tata Steel had to deal with this issue in relation to the Chorus steel plant in the UK. Yes, I heard this on the news last week and thought the same thing. The new owners could only make the business of making steel at Chorus viable if they cancelled the final salary pension scheme and got the workforce to agree to a much lower pension at the end of their careers. The stark choice was between jobs and lower pensions or no job and no pension. Perhaps a bit of this cold medicine should be administered to the civil service here. They don't deserve a special status that they're entitled to. They think they're paid more than the private sector. They think that they are paid more than the private sector on average, to the tune of £70 a week, according to the 2014 Manx survey. So, Mr. Cannon, it's long gone time that you looked at this issue in the island, dealt with it, says Mark. Okie dokie. Rob called. I listened to the budget yesterday. I thought it was quite good. It does help some people at the bottom of the pile, but I think a wealth tax should be introduced for those living here in the big houses, people on big incomes making money on big investments in the island. I think that the tax cap has gone up, hasn't it? And it's going to go up fairly dramatically over the next couple of years. So that's maybe a move in the right direction as far as that's concerned. But it was interesting that the Treasury Minister did say that he was a big believer in the fact that, tax cap individuals were of real value to the Isle of Man, and that whilst there was a feeling that the tax cap was slightly unfair, it was still a good thing overall. So I think a pragmatic approach to that. If we didn't have a civil service with their pounds pay for mediocre, middle-of-the-road employees, there would be an even bigger mass exodus from the island, as all would be unable to afford to live here. They are onto a good thing. Okay, that's in text speak, so I hope I translated it properly. I'm fed up with this means testing obsession. To have a fair system, it would be necessary to know a person's liabilities before you could assess their means. Well, I'm not an expert in means testing, but isn't that the whole thing? You look at incoming and you look at outgoing and you work out what their means are based on that, rather than just maybe it is just on income. I don't know, but yeah, certainly proper means testing would have to look at somebody's liabilities and work out whether or not that's fair or not. Good on Chris Roberts Shaw. He's attempting to address the top-heavy government and overwhelming number of highly paid civil servants. Sooner everyone in government gets behind him to get a leaner, smarter government, the better. Keep at it, Chris, says one of our contributors. I have to say, over the years that I've introduced him, Chris Roberts Shaw, usually what he says makes perfect sense to me. It's just that the way he says it sometimes gets people's backs up, I think, is the problem. He comes over as being slightly imperious, and I don't think he is. I think it's just his manner that sometimes works against him. Just a personal observation, but if you've got any thoughts about the budget, then don't be shy, get them to us. I think that maybe what government ought to do, and we've said this before on the programme, is that they ought to look at this Lean Sigma thing, the TPS Toyota production system that's been around for 20 or 30 years now, and a lot of big companies have done that, and it just streamlines the whole operation. Anything that doesn't go towards improving the product or the service is done away with. I mean, it really is quite brutal, but firms like British Aerospace, I think, are big users of that and employ people to do that. And if it makes them leaner and meaner, it just means that they've got more money for baksheesh then in the Middle East. But it seems to be the way forward for a lot of these huge employers. And maybe it's something that government should look at. I don't know. We've got Buster on the line.
Just 3 quick points. Alf Cannon yesterday made a very arrogant statement, I think, when he said that he wasn't prepared to listen to keyboard warriors.
Yeah, I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, so I looked up at his manifesto, and he is certainly was using that widely. But I'll just quote you a line out of it. It says, "Listen to local community concerns and act appropriately according to the majority view."
Yeah.
Now, you can't have your cake and eat it.
Well, yeah, but keyboard warriors are people who just troll other people usually, and they get on and get all aggressive and, try and make out that they've got a representative point of view, and quite often they haven't. So I can see what he's saying.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm sure you know the site that I'm referring to, where you have to give your name and everything else. It's a good debating chamber. But anyways, that was my point on that
Okay.
one. The other one is, I hadn't heard of the sugar tax.
All right.
Now, I don't know where that's come from. That's just appeared out of the blue.
Well, we've talked about it 2 or 3 times on this programme alone, so we've asked whether or not we thought it would be a good thing in the Isle of Man, so obviously people have been listening.
Yeah, I mean, obviously to bring it forward, but I would have thought, there might have been a bit more debate about it. And the third one is come 2021, when we had to find this 58 million. And there's nothing in the budget that comes anywhere near to raise that amount of money by that time.
Public sector pensions, yeah.
Yeah, so it's sitting there as a big black hole. Obviously, nothing's going to go into it in this current financial year. So we're down to 2 or 3 years where we've got to find this huge amount of money. And yet there seems to be not even the start of putting some money in the kitty.
Yeah, but more importantly than any of that, Buster, is the fact that actually you can get tax relief now on buying a push bike and Lycra outfit. So, it was important that we got that one through, wasn't it?
Well, I think we can think of Boris Johnson there, really. And
I don't think either you or I'd look good in Lycra, to be honest.
No, I think I'll pass on that. There's a lot more guys out there with decent six-packs than me, so...
Yeah, me too. All right, Buster, thanks for your call.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Is donating public money to the Syrian refugee crisis likely to be more effective than welcoming refugees to Manx shores? The Manx government is to donate a further £1 million to fight the humanitarian crisis in Syria. But it was announced on Friday the island won't take in the most traumatised and vulnerable refugees under the UK's resettlement scheme. After a review, it was agreed the island doesn't have the level of support and specialist help needed. A 1,000-signature petition was presented to the Chief Minister only weeks ago, which asked for 25 refugees to be homed on the island by 2020. But there's disappointment about the decision from some following that decision. Is giving money likely to be more effective than rehoming refugees in the Isle of Man? Or would taking in 25 of those affected by the crisis be more meaningful? Tell us your thoughts on this. And Derek's called. He thinks that this should have gone before Tynwald, this £1 million, rather than being a comb-in decision. What else? Sorry, Stu, but you're too normal to be a world leader. A bizarre comb-over is minimal requirement. Well, I'm getting close to the comb-over, actually. It's just there's not enough to comb over. Why should we support Syrian refugees, asks one of our contributors. I don't see Arab states bending over backwards to help. I can think of a number of places in the Isle of Man that would benefit from £1 million. Well said, Howard. A bit of common sense at last, says Dewan. So there you go, typical of this programme. 2 completely polar opposite points of view. Howard's telling the truth. We don't have the specialist care on our island, and chances are that they'll be well mashed by our mental health system and never recover. They're doing the best thing. We should offer convalescence after they've been treated by the UK or other areas, says Anne. Okay, well, that's a thought, I suppose. Hey, boy, that £1 million equates to £40,000 an immigrant. Well, yeah, if we were going to have them moving here, which we're not. How wonderful. How come they don't spend all that money on the Manx people? Do-gooders, keep it here. That from G. Syria is a very wealthy country. Why do these do-gooders keep trying to say otherwise? Is it wealthy now? The only pictures I've seen on the telly of it is just that it's bombed to a shell virtually everywhere that you see. Why do these do-gooders keep trying to say otherwise? It should look after its own people. The so-called refugees are getting out because of political and religious differences. Stu, petitions have no place in a democracy because they only tell one side of the story, says David H. Yes, I think you said that last week, David, and I think you might have a fair point, actually. I think certainly online petitions are very dubious because you end up getting people signing them from all over the world, and something that, it affects the Isle of Man, we don't necessarily need people all around the world signing petitions about what the Isle of Man should do with its money, do we? I don't know if that happened in this case or not, but I think it's happened in the past. Let's go to the lines because we've got Jeff on talking about Syrian refugees. Hello, Jeff.
Well, my view is that we should take some of these people are a very small number.
Yeah.
They were a small place. And I'm thinking of the legend of the Good Samaritan and the road to Jericho, and the guy who fell among thieves, and a Samaritan who took pity on him, brought him to an inn, looked after him, and with some investment of time and effort. And I think all these people who rabbit on about do-gooders this and do-gooders that, what is the equivalent of a do-gooder? Is it a do-badder? Somebody who just doesn't give a toss about other people?
I don't think it's that at all. I think a lot of this depends on whether or not you've got a reasonable standard of living. And I would suggest, I mean, you're enjoying retirement as a doctor, so I'm guessing that you're not worried where the next fiver comes from. A lot of people listening to this programme today, Jeff, will be facing hardship. You know, they'll have to decide whether or not to heat or eat, and people worry about the fact that the Isle of Man government, their government, is giving away £1 million when they can barely afford to live. So is it not fair to say, and I'm not having a go at anybody who is a do-gooder, but is it easier to be a do-gooder if you're a relatively comfortable person?
That's a point, and a fair point. But, you know, the Chief Minister has diverted money, and in fact the Isle of Man gives far less in overseas aid than it should do anyway, only about 0.07 or something like that of its income,
Yes.
a fraction of it all. And I think it's just a shame. And I think people, even people who don't have that much cash, some of them at least, I'm confident, would have pity and empathy and sympathy with people from Syria who really suffered a great deal. And we do have facilities over here for counselling and support, and we have good-hearted people who would be willing to give hospitality to a small number of desperate people.
Yeah.
And I think it's really just waving it aside and not taking it seriously.
Well, £1 million is pretty serious, Jeff, and you're right. I mean, a lot of people do have empathy, but then, you know, the Good Samaritan wasn't talking about helping somebody that might strap on a suicide vest at some point. Now, I appreciate that might be Islamophobic of me, but that's the sort of thing that worries an awful lot of people about welcoming people from a completely alien civilization like this.
Well, you know, the Isle of Man has been a home to refugees from the UK for a long, long time, and other people too from different countries.
But similar values usually, surely.
Not necessarily. If we scrutinise everybody because of their values, they are not our values, they're somebody else's, then these people almost seem to be inhuman and alien species.
Right.
And really, people are one. They're human beings. We're all human beings, and I think these people should be treated with respect and consideration and decency, and I think it should at least be looked at more carefully than it has been. All
right, well, no, it's definitely a point of view shared by 1,000 other people at least. So
I hope so. Rather more, I imagine. Anyway, thank you very much for listening.
No, thanks for calling, Jeff. It's always nice to hear different people's points of view, whether you agree with them or not. But at least we've heard Jeff's point of view, so we can decide whether we agree with it or not. A lot of people listen to this programme and shout at the radio when really they ought to be picking up the phone and phoning up so that we can hear your point of view about it. Hi, I feel funding the refugees is better for the Isle of Man, as how do you choose 25 people with regard to the old courthouse? The government should look at how many offices they rent in Douglas and try and use out of town where possible cheaper rents, parking, less congestion, regeneration of towns, says Sharon. Right, that's, yeah. Stu, the £1 million is the best decision the present government has made to date. What happens a few years down the line when these refugees want to bring in their expanded families? Who's going to pick up the tab? We are, the taxpayers, not the rose-tinted glasses-wearing do-holders. Predictive text, Howard. I think you meant to say do-gooders. I would rather give my money to rich farmers. I expect that wish will be grasped upon by a government. Patrick called. I don't agree. Now, this is the other point of view now, to Jeff's point of view. Patrick called. I don't agree with taking Syrian refugees. I don't even agree with giving money to the United Nations for it. I didn't agree with Europe taking Syrian refugees, and I don't agree with Britain taking them. Yes, it's hard, but life is hard. I have no sympathy. I don't agree with it. We shouldn't use our hearts. We should use our heads. We need the money. All right. I don't know where I sit in this, really. Probably in the middle as usual, which I realise is a bit wishy-washy. But, regarding the island taking in Syrian refugees, I understand that 1,000 signatures were presented to the government. I'm not saying the island should or shouldn't take these people in, but what I would say is that 83,000 haven't signed the petition, so not really supported, is it? Personally, I'm not in favour of the £1 million either. The Middle East is awash with money, and it's time that these countries came to the rescue of those caught up in these troubles. I think that's a good point, Ray. Yeah, somebody else mentioned earlier on about the fact that, you know, those neighbouring countries in the Middle East, a lot of them, certainly the Gulf states, are doing absolutely nothing about this. You know, they are Muslim states, and you would think that they'd be the first to help, and apparently not. I bet if the shoe was on the other foot, all these moaning numpties who keep saying all the money for ourselves would be the first to complain, says Dave. Well, yeah, but that's the trouble. The shoe isn't going to be on the other foot ever, is it? I can't imagine the Isle of Man ever appealing to Syria for help. I'm surprised Mr. Crane and the rest of his supporters are just asking for refugees from Syria. There are wars, conflicts, famine and social injustice all over the world, with people trying to escape their unlucky circumstances. We won't solve these problems by evacuations. The only way to help is trying to resolve the problem in the country of origin. Send aid by all means, but diplomacy is the only long-term solution, says Alan. Good point. If the Foxdale freedom fighters kicked up a storm and took over the island and decided to ethnically cleanse Castletown of its people and I became a refugee, I don't think I'd want to be sent to a Muslim country where I couldn't speak the lingo or have my own people to mix with, etc. The island's made the right decision. Support many, not just the few. That from Boris. There's a couple of valid points within that, I think, aren't there? I wonder whether £1 million could have been set up as a trust fund to provide the support needed by paying for whatever specialists needed to be brought here if we haven't got them, says Stuart. £1 million sent in aid for Syrian refugees. Wonder how much of that will be fairly distributed and reaches those needing help. 50% maybe, says Keith. I think that foreign aid is a lot more carefully spent these days. I know that a lot of people were very concerned that years gone by, you know, you'd send you £2 to Biafra or wherever, it'd end up in some warlord's pocket to buy missiles and rockets and things, or to build them a new palace. And I don't think that happens anything like as often as it used to. I think that, you know, if money is given like this, I think it's usually pretty well spent. It's funny how many people would take in a Syrian refugee but not a local homeless person, says Josh. Stu, easy way to sort this problem over overseas aid: put a tick box on everybody's tax form. Those wanting to donate, tick the box. I pay enough tax to this awful excuse of a government without them taking more to send off Ireland. That's from Bert in Port St Mary. Yeah, I think that's a very good idea, actually. And I realise that I can't sit on the fence about this one. I think I'm pretty much against the Syrian refugees. I might as well pin me colours to the mast on this one. And I'm not sure about the £1 million aid either. I had the TV on quietly in the background while I was doing something else on Sunday, and every ad break had some sort of a demand for my cash. You know, it was charity stuff. And, you know, I saw these things and your heart goes out every time. And yes, I would like to save the polar bears and the chimpanzees and the lions and the tigers and the starving, you know, there's just so much of it. And I think you get to the point where you think, you know, I just can't, I couldn't make any difference really. And they say send £2 a month and it'll make a huge difference to somebody. I'm not convinced that it really does in the great scheme of things. So yes, I think I've got to come back to the charity begins at home thing. I mean, £1 million. Apparently, we've always had trouble with dentists in the Isle of Man, NHS dentists. I mean, wouldn't that pay for 10 dentists for a year? And wouldn't that be better for the population of the Isle of Man? Now, maybe that's heartless. I don't know. If it is, then I've got to hold my hands up to it. Stu, we have homeless people and food banks on the island. Charity begins at home, says Bill. You're wrong. The Gulf states are backing the likes of IS and Al-Qaeda. Yes, and therein lies the problem, I think. Where is Tynwald finding the £1 million to help refugees when they can't afford to fund some of our own services? Time is coming when thousands of people are going to say enough is enough and not pay the tax bill. Well, I think that the worm is starting to turn, isn't it? And that's why Trump has been elected president of the US, because he was saying things that, you know, the elites were not at all happy about, but the general public were very happy about. And I think people are fed up of being told how to think about things, and that's why he's in. I think that's why Britain voted to get out of Europe as well. The elites were saying, no, we're better in, and I think that the general public is saying, hang on a minute, you keep selling us down the river, so we'll not have any of that. Afternoon Stew. Firstly, petitions can be made to reflect whatever the petitioner wants, so 1,000 may well have signed it, but its authenticity could well be up to question. What this tends to serve is the guilty liberal conscience of the vainglorious bleeding hearts. It's all about them. Oh, look at me, look how righteous I am, how pious I am, what a good human being I am. The blunt truth is that these so-called refugees backed the wrong side in a civil war against a dictator, egged on by the type of fools who now feel we should pick up the humanitarian aftermath. They backed the wrong side and they've lost. Had it not been for Uncle Vlad, Syria would have descended into the anarchic chaos like we see throughout the region. I wouldn't give them one single penny or take a single one off them. That from Mike. Strong words. £1 million would build 10 council houses. Yep, true. And you've always got to say, what have the Syrians ever done for us? Well, they gave us the road to Damascus, of course. £1 million would more than pay us women who've had our state pension robbed off us by the government, says Cindy. Okay, well, I'm sure there are lots of ways that people could spend £1 million, but I mean, you know, does the other side have a valid point? Should we have put 25 Syrian refugees in the Isle of Man? I understand the arguments against it, and I wonder whether or not it's a pragmatic approach. I think the Chief Minister or somebody else suggested that, you know, would that then mean, I think it was our interviewer, Ewan, suggested that would that then mean that it opened the door naturally for immigrants from other countries, migrants from other countries that might be even less welcome than Syrians.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast, featuring highlights from the programme over the past week.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Does bringing back Miss Isle of Man infringe on equality? Is it sexist? The event used to pack out the Villa Marina, a highlight in the island's social calendar in the tourism season. Plans to revive it are due to be announced over the next few weeks, but the idea hasn't been well received by everyone. A Douglas councillor, for instance, says it's a backward step in the modern day, especially as the Equality Bill makes its way into legislation. Organisers say it would be an opportunity for young Manx women to work with local businesses and to raise funds for 12 local charities, and probably travel the world and help people and meet interesting people on the trip. Tell us your thoughts about this. Is it one of those things that we all ought to be apoplectic about? Or is it a storm in a teacup? Is it just a bit of good fun? Or is it setting the clock back on things like equality? Is it sexist, for example? What do you think about that? I see that James got some comments after the programme this morning, so we'll have a look at them. First comment goes to Darren. Really, Stu, of all the things going on, fuel rises, etc., and your subject is Miss Isle of Man. Well, I don't think we've ever spoken about Miss Isle of Man. We've talked about fuel rises an awful lot of times, but there's not much that we can do about it or say about it, except that we don't like it. I didn't know it had gone up again, to be honest, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that people want to talk about, Darren. That's our job, to try and find things that people want to talk about. Stu, Karen Angela is a fossil with her beliefs. Live and let live. Maybe she should step down as a councillor, as I doubt she speaks for the majority. That's according to Ian. I don't know. I think most of the women that I know were completely amazed rather than outraged at the thought of Miss Isle of Man making a comeback into the social calendar for the in that it is, you know, a beauty contest of any sort. This kind of event is seen very much as something from the last century, so people were amazed about it. But what do you think about it? A bit of good clean fun, or is it something that should be consigned to the history books? My personal view is that this competition is a bit outdated and not good for the island's profile, but if it does go ahead, the public will be the judges by the number of bums on seats, says Neil. Well, that's true. Yeah, we're all grown up enough to decide. If we're outraged by the idea of it, we'll not go. If we're not, if we think it's a bit of good, clean, honest fun, then we'll turn up and have a look at it. Afternoon, Stu. Well done and well said, Karen. That's from Gary in Ramsey. Okay, well, there you go. It's all a storm in a D cup, says David H. I did that joke last week when I talked to Beth about it. And what else? It makes me cringe to think that Miss Isle of Man is making a comeback. It's in a society that aims to be more inclusive. Why are we encouraging young women to enter a pageant and be judged so that we can pick the best one? Karen Angela's totally right about suggesting it should include boys too. Why not? She represents many women who cringe when they hear this. Let's be progressive, not regressive. Okay, fair dues. I mean, let's face it, life, it's all very well being politically correct about these things. A lot of people do make all sorts of judgments based on how somebody looks, don't they? So isn't this just an example of that? Isn't this just the same as a nightclub on a Saturday night? In the girls all dress in the best and make themselves up to look as attractive as possible to snare a husband? Or is that an old-fashioned point of view as well? Political correctness, yeah. Stu, I'm Manx through and through, and I'm sick and tired of people from England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales coming here and telling the Isle of Man what it should and shouldn't be doing. They need to go back to where they came from and preach there, says Rob. Okay. That doesn't really further the debate, though, Rob. So are you saying that you think Miss Isle of Man is a good idea or not? Of all the things wrong with the island, people still get the knickers in a twist, well, and underpants as well, if it's going to be not a sexist thing, over the least important things. If this is something you don't like, don't watch it or read about it. So what? Get a life. Okay, I think Karen Angela needs to go and lie down in a dark cupboard. How can you judge males and females together? Male judges would vote on females and vice versa. It's only for fun, much needed in today's climate. It's only wrong if you're forced into this competition. And that's from a female listener. That's interesting. So that's a woman who thinks that there's nothing wrong with this. More comments that came in this morning after James first aired the story. Miss Isle of Man, get a life. Flying against the Equality Act, grow up. Might not be everyone's cup of tea. Karen Angela says you wouldn't apply to be a brain surgeon unless you believe that you had the skills to do the job. What's the difference? This is hardly discrimination. Nothing wrong with the competition. And my first reaction about Miss Isle of Man was similar to the interviewees, thinking it should be for both sexes. This, of course, applies to other things other than where basic decency and modesty are concerned, such as changing rooms, for example. How can Manx Radio have a programme dedicated to women? Of course, at some point, PC can go too far, so maybe it depends on the intent and how things are done. Yes, good point. Good point, Saul. It's one of those things, isn't it? I don't know that. I'm very much of the opinion that if you don't like it, then just avoid it. And I don't think it does anybody any harm necessarily. It is a very old-fashioned sort of a thing. But let's face it, people these days are quite happy to take pictures of themselves. I think that we're getting far more narcissistic as a society than we used to be. I mean, when I was a young fellow, I wouldn't dream of taking a picture of yourself and publishing it for people to look at. If you're in somebody else's snap, fair dues. But nowadays, I mean, the idea of a selfie, people actually buy the equipment to take selfies, post pictures of themselves online constantly. So it is a very narcissistic society. So is this just not, an example of that kind of thing? Look at me, look at me, look at me. I don't know. Oh, we're joined on the line now by Jerry the Brief. Hello, Jerry.
Yes, I think I'm very much in favour of the Equality Bill, and I'm very much in favour of all these equality measures. I think they're long overdue, but if there is to be a Miss Isle of Man contest, Stu,
yes,
there's one thing I will say to the organisers: can both you and I be judges, please? Because I think we'd be superb judges, personally.
I think we would, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so if Mr. Organiser or Mrs. Organiser nowadays, if you're listening in, we'd like to be judges. We've got most of our own teeth, and I think we do the job very well.
Well, and neither of us can run very fast, which is probably a good thing, Jerry.
Run very fast, especially me, yeah.
All right, thank you very much. That's Jerry Carter. I don't know. I don't know if I dare be a judge. I'd probably be pilloried by people. Here's another one. Stu, this is from Joe, and I've heard Miss Isle of Man is only coming back because Terry Kringle can't run as fast now as he did in the 60s. Quite likely. Let's be politically correct these days and make it Miss Transgender and be done with it. Won't be long before these feminists will want to dispense with the man in the name of the Isle of Man, says Chris. Well, yeah, you see. Thin end of the wedge. People are judged by their their brains, sporting prowess, wealth, and why not your looks? A lot of jealousy, ugly rich people with brains, I wonder, says Josh. It's all very well saying that we want equality and all the rest of it, but, life doesn't present equality. There are some people far more nice to look at than others. There are people with far bigger brains than others, people who can play instruments and others can't. I mean, it isn't an equal playing field for everybody. And it might well be that you say, well, yes, but, everybody starts off the same, and if you give them the same opportunities, then everybody should be equal. It's never going to happen, I don't think, is it? So I don't have a big problem with it. Now, I've got 3 daughters. If any of my 3 daughters said, Dad, I'm going to go into a beauty contest, for one, I'd be amazed because they're all feminists. But would I be bothered about it? I suppose I would, really. Yeah, the thought of one of my kids standing there in a bathing suit in front of judges like me and Jerry Carter. Yes, I suppose I would be a little bit nervous about it. So I don't know. How many people who are against Miss Isle of Man are ugly, says Jeff. Good. Okay, well, I'm glad to see everybody's taking this seriously. If you've got a point of view, then do share it with us. 66 13 68. Another couple of comments that came in this morning. I wanted to point out not everything about the 21st century is good and 20th century bad. I couldn't believe what Karen Angela had to say about this. That was from Ian. John said, we're in danger of becoming a nanny state where the ill-informed minority of busybodies tell us what we can or can't watch, see and do. Miss Isle of Man is a throwback to the 70s and 80s and maybe dated, but certainly doesn't fly in the face of the Equality Bill. That's about discrimination. Doesn't it discriminate against ugly people? Let the event stand or fall by its popularity. Let the public choose and not the vocal minority. I'm sick of them telling us what we should do and see. Such a shame that Karen Angela has jumped the gun and ruined what could have been a great launch for Miss Isle of Man, where she clearly didn't know all the facts. If they did a men and women contest, I bet she wouldn't like it if a man won over a lady, and then she'd have another issue to run to the press with. I'm looking forward to hearing from the organisers when they're ready about the new Miss Isle of Man. Good. Okay. Add your voice to the number of comments that we've got about this already. I think it's quite funny, actually. It's the sort of story that I quite like us to cover on this programme, see what people think about it. Comment that came in this morning. Accepting everybody's entitled to their opinion. Comments regarding Miss Isle of Man remind me of the people who say you can't tell children that they failed or mark work with red ink. If we don't have goals, adversity and controversy to overcome, we'll end up in a world of mediocrity with no will to achieve. People want to take part, don't make decisions on their behalf. They're able to be responsible for their own actions. That came in from Ali. Some more texts. I hope there'll be private booths at the Villa. It's not a lap dancing club. Miss Isle of Man is a terrible thing. Miss Wet T-shirt would be far better, says Ian. Bring back Miss Wet T-shirt, I say, and for the ladies, Mr. Wet Undies, says Boris. Yes, bring back Miss Isle of Man. Also looking forward to the start of the new programme on Manx Radio Men today. What can we talk about? Cars, beer. What is Miss Isle of Man anyway, says David H. Oh, Miss Isle. I see. Okay. Just remember, it's Miss Isle of Man. If you weren't born here, you should not be a contestant. Oh, right, okay, good. Crikey, this woman needs to get a life. It'll bring a bit of fun, maybe. We should up it up 4 keys. Question time. What? For them to spend more of our hard-earned money. What? To discuss it. On a consultant, second part of the text. Can there be a Mr. Isle of Man as well as a Miss Isle of Man competition, please, says CJ. Well, I mean, that's the thing. We blokes are constantly being told that we're sexist pigs, male chauvinist pigs and all the rest of it. And let me be the first to say that I like looking at ladies. I like looking at girls. Can't help it. It's not creepy, I don't think, personally. It's just one of those things. It's attractive, isn't it? A well-turned-out person of a gender that you find appealing. So I don't have a problem with that at all, but it is considered to be a bit of a poor show these days, whereas women quite happily get these sort of dream team boys round, which is far more sexist than a lot of the things that are being talked about now. And that's kind of all right, but if blokes do it, we're all pervs, and if women do it, it's a bit of fun. Thoroughly enjoying today's show, says Karen Angela. Thanks for getting in touch, Karen. Let's see how Mo stands as far as this is concerned. Hello, Mo.
I just thought nobody had actually come on and said they'd actually ever been in Miss Isle of Man, and I was.
Oh, right, okay.
In the 50s, And I was working at the hotel across the road, and the accountant decided to enter me into it. And it was all a good laugh, and it was in the Villa Marina Gardens. And I was told that I wasn't really voluptuous enough. And my figure was too athletic.
See, rejection at such an early age.
At an early age, in the 50s.
And has it spoilt the rest of your life? Do you feel as though you were demeaned?
Not at all. No. I just killed myself laughing at the time.
Yes, yeah.
But I did get a mirror. I have got a little mirror somewhere that actually says that I was an entrance.
Oh, right, an entrance prize sort of thing.
Yes,
yeah.
That's right, for just having the gall to to do it, I think it was.
I mean, beauty contests are very out of fashion these days, aren't they?
Well, they are, but it was good fun. I mean, I wouldn't have entered myself, but I was entered by the accountants who worked for the firm I work for.
Yeah. And what about now? I mean, do you think that it would be a reasonable sort of event if it was brought back, or do you think it ought to be left in the 20th century?
I don't know. I think everybody's so serious about everything now. You know, it would be nice to have a bit of fun.
Yes.
But, I mean, maybe people don't think it is fun, but I thought it was fun anyway.
Yeah, good stuff. Excellent. Oh, well, there you go. I've spoken to a competitor in Miss Isle of Man. My day is complete. Mark says, I'll listen to the pious holier-than-thou feminists who want to ban the Miss Isle of Man when the same people stop queuing up to see the likes of the Chippendales, when they stop whinging about the fact that they have to retire at 65, just like us men, and when holding a door open is viewed for what it is, as an act of courtesy and not a patriarchal stereotyping and reinforcing of outdated prejudice or some other such nonsense. On the fence as ever, best regards from Mark. Yes. I wonder what Karen's of you would be. Magic Mike, what? Karen's idea? I don't understand your text, I'm afraid. It's a bit garbled. I suppose it would be better than having to listen to the Manx bard whose poetry makes no sense, says Malk. Good to hear about Miss Isle of Man from some of the totty. You see, Mo was very brave. She came on, she said she did it in the 50s, and now you've said that, and she'll be thinking, you know, what? I'm not totty. How dare they? I'd just like to say that's Mark who said it and not me, Mo.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Will an increase in the tax cap create a fairer system? It was announced in the budget that the amount paid by those who take advantage of it will rise year on year. From 2018, the tax cap will be increased by £25,000 a year until it reaches £200,000 in the 2020/21 financial year. Treasury Minister Alfred Cannon outlined the change during his budget speech this week. What do you think about this? Is it a fairer increase? Does the rise answer some critics of the tax cap system? Or could it lead to wealthy individuals choosing to go elsewhere to live? This from David H. Stu, although tax caps in general are not fair or equitable, they are pragmatic and sensible in the real world of stiff competition, says David H. Yes. And I think that's the way that I've always thought about this. I find it quite irritating, the fact that as a percentage of my total income, I pay a much higher percentage than somebody who's a millionaire who pays the tax cap. I mean, I don't know what my average is, maybe 15% overall or something like that in terms of income tax and national insurance. And I think it's probably a third of that for the people who are paying the tax cap on average. So that seems unfair. But the government's always been at pains to say, listen, you know, this is bringing in millions of pounds and loads of jobs to the Isle of Man at no real cost to us, apart from maybe a moral cost, I don't know. So I think I've always thought that it's a pragmatic solution and fine, live and let live. If the overall effect of tax cappers is a good one for the island, then it's something that I think we've got to support. Do you feel like that, or do you object to it? Nick Sweet Shop says, I think a modest increase in the tax cap is perfectly reasonable. I don't think it'll raise much money in budget terms, so it's more of a moral alteration. Yeah, I think you might be right. I certainly don't think any of them will pack up and head off the island for 25,000 quid extra. That'd be like me having to charge an extra 10 pence a quarter of sweets and deciding to close the sweet shop. Unlikely, says Nick. Quarter of sweets. Can you still sell quarters? It's not 100 grams or whatever these days. A quarter of sweets. Loose sweets. It's ages since I bought loose sweets. I keep thinking I must come down to Castletown and have a look in your shop. You get in touch with the programme quite often. Please, can you mention that tonight's Lib Van meeting for the Onken constituency, scheduled for 7 o'clock at the Archie Knox, has been postponed due to the high winds? Yes, I can. I have done. And John Morrison sent me a link into something about a TomTom. Do we have the worst traffic in the world? I don't think we do in the Isle of Man. Other places have rush hours. We have rush minutes in the Isle of Man. A couple of times a day it gets a little bit busy, but it's not bad. I used to live in near Glossop in Derbyshire, which is sort of to the east of Manchester, and commute in every day by car. And the road around that area is just disgrace. I mean, it never gets. At least when I lived there, and we're going back, 20 odd years now. When I probably 30 years, it used to be busy. Rush hours used to be busy. So in the morning it used to be jammed, and then in the evening it used to be jammed. Nowadays, when I go and see the kids, it's just jammed up for. It feels like about 16 hours a day. Just traffic not going anywhere, very very slowly. So I don't think we've got real traffic problems in the Isle of Man. Now people will say, "Oh, well, it used to be a lot quieter." Well, yes, of course. I don't think we've got real problems. How about the tax cap being adjustable depending on how much the tax receipts are paid in by the tax capper's employees? Yes and no. I suppose it all gets a bit complex to do it. These things need to be kept fairly simple, don't they? I know what you're saying, and we are told often that the tax cappers are bringing in a great advantage to the island. They're employing thousands of people. All those people are paying income tax, so we're getting the tax one way or another. Now, if somebody just chooses to live here in the larger state somewhere out in the countryside and not employ lots of people, then I suppose that they're not making the same level of contribution indirectly. So I can see what you're trying to do with that, but I think it might get all a little bit complicated. And, I think the Treasury Minister was quite keen to point out that whatever people think about this, it's not something that we want to do away with. We welcome people with lots of money to come to the Isle of Man because it's good for all of us, generally speaking. It's just irritating at times. But that's the politics of envy, and we've got to try and avoid that, haven't we? Stu, you say they bring in lots of jobs to the island. This is the tax cappers. Can you give me any examples, says Claire? I think it would be unfair to me to give any examples because I'd be kind of guessing at them. The Treasury Minister and politicians for years have been saying that people who work within the tax cap system bring in lots of jobs. I think we've got lots of millionaires here who own hotels or equestrian stables or businesses that employ lots and lots of people. So, I wouldn't want to particularly give any examples in case I cite the wrong people. How about the tax cap being adjustable depending on how much tax receipts are paid in by the tax capper's employees? The more relief the tax cappers get, says Alan. Well, that was an idea that somebody else came up with just before the last piece of music, and I think it might be a bit complex to work that out personally, but I do take the point. In just over 2 years' time, the public sector pension fund reserve fund will have run out, leaving a shortfall of £58 million, over £1 million a week, and nobody knows where the money is going to come from. Okay, all right, nothing to do with tax cap, or is it? I don't know. Can someone tell me, to take advantage of the tax cap, does the person have to live here or just have a residential address? As far as I know, and I'm not an expert in taxation, you've got to be a resident here for purposes of taxation. I'm not quite sure what the rules are about how much time you can spend off island. But as far as I know, you can't just have a sort of a PO box here and pay Manx income tax. I don't think that the UK government would allow that. Never mind the Manx government. Claire says, Stu, that's right, I can't think of any either. I didn't say I couldn't think of any. I just said I didn't particularly want to name any in case I got them wrong and all the rest of it. But I'm thinking about people like John Whittaker and Trevor Hemmings. I'm sure employ lots of people, but I can't think of the names of a lot of people who own hotels in Douglas, for example. I think there are plenty of people who are tax cappers who bring employment to the Isle of Man. So I think it's disingenuous, Claire, to say that you can't think of any. Hi, Stu. John Whittaker employs a small staff at his property only. He flies on and off the Rock daily to do business elsewhere. A current project to deny the island the right to use the Princess Landing Stage at Liverpool Dock so he can use it for cruise ships. Yet he's saved millions in tax by being here. So much for benefiting the island. Well, I don't know if that's true or not, Mark. I've got no reason to doubt you, but Okay. Charles being on. Dear Stu, I know 4 of these high net worth individuals, and since they've come here, they've provided 900 new jobs based on that the fact that these guys have made money by employing people. They can't seem to just stop. It doesn't cost us anything to let them come here and spend in the economy. Good. Okay. Thank you for all your comments on that.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should there be more emphasis on maintaining the island's infrastructure? That's the question for part 2. Directing more money at maintenance will cut costs in the long run, according to the department's Minister Ray Harmer. In his budget announcement on Tuesday, Alf Canning, the Treasury Minister, promised to invest £90 million in capital projects over the next 12 months. Mr Harmer told Chris Cave maintaining what we already have should also be a priority. He does seem to talk an awful lot of sense, doesn't he? And he does seem to have hit the ground running in terms of getting things sorted out, Ray Harmer. Is planned maintenance the key to keeping costs down in the long run? Are we guilty of letting things go wrong or break down even before we look after them properly? Hello, Howard.
Just listened to your Monday programme, and Mr Harmer was on, and he was saying they're going to start on the promenade.
Yes.
It's not, that it's out of the question, but it should be done. But they're also starting round about the same time and closing a large section of Bucks Road, the 2 main roads into and out of Douglas.
Oh, right. Yeah.
The Bucks Road section is going to be closed in 3 phases for 3 months, starting at Rosemount and ending up down at Circular Road.
Right.
All I'm saying is probably the DOI have got facilities down there because the prom's wide enough to put the lanes of traffic for going in and out. But for folk to remember this for the next 3 months, to leave a bit more extra time in coming in or even going home or going to pick the kids up or whatever.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bit chaotic.
What's wrong with Bucks Road? It's not the road surface. I assume that it's underneath it or something. Is it the drains?
Company.
Gas.
It's the gas company. Yeah. It's actually on your website. That's what I saw at first.
Right, yeah.
And because of the nature of the work, they work on both sides of the roads. Obviously, they're replacing gas feeds into the houses.
I see.
They need to shut the road its entirety.
Yeah.
It's essential work. It's not much they can do about it. But it's just something for the public to bear in mind that it's not going to be the easiest of places between now and June.
No, I expect they'll do a diversion around Westmoreland Road or something like that, won't they?
They are doing, the buses. Yeah, but even still, that's a lot of heavy traffic coming around that way, and especially with the new school there as well.
New school, yeah. All right, no, good point. We'll have that. Thank you very much, Howard. Let's have a look. Have we got any comments yet about this make, do, and mend thing? Stu, the DOI doing preventative repairs is okay if they change the mindset. At the moment, everything that they look at is beyond fixing and has to be rebuilt with over-the-top replacements. Rolls-Royce Solutions, you see. The latest thing is the tram stables. Can't do a cheap repair. No, build a new temporary one. Laxey Bridge. All Laxey wanted was a bridge, not all the rubbish that's now in place and still not finished. Right then, okay. DOI maintenance, the things that seem to be ignored for years now: potholes, white lines, non-existing in some places, painting of halt signs and cat's eyes not replaced. We have a section of new road from Rugby into Andreas, which was completed a couple of years ago and which is still waiting for half the cat's eyes to go back in. I've phoned the DOI on a yearly basis about potholes made good at the entrance of Bala Lock. Eventually some crew will come out and throw cold tarmac in the drive over it a few times and disappear. Within weeks it's back as bad as ever. The whole area needs to be repaired. The way the department goes about this is a joke and is wasteful financially. Please, DOI, come out and do something once. Do the job once but properly, says Ray. Thank you, Ray. Who's responsible for roadside trees on the island, as there seems to be a lot come down every time there's a storm? It's only a matter of time before somebody gets killed, says John. Well, that'll be God, you see. He's responsible for the roadside trees. There's been a chronic that's from an atheist. There's been a chronic underspending maintenance on government buildings for years. Even now the budget for this is well under the amount to keep the properties in the current condition, let alone improve them. That from Alan. They should never have totally disbanded the old highway board workers. Each area had their own maintenance team. Now it's left a mess on roads and our glens and footpaths. Okie dokie. It's very easy for us to look outside of the situation, isn't it, and tell the DOI how they ought to run their operations. I was just thinking about it. There are so many sort of smallish problems around the island. I live out near Mount Murray now, and I've noticed that there's a sunken grid on the Mount Murray back road, and to fix it, they've put a cone on it. And it's been like that now for some months. There's a cone there. And that, I mean, it works. It does the job. I'm not complaining about it necessarily. But it does seem that things like that don't get fixed very quickly. And I was thinking, you know, what they need at the DOI, because we all know best, don't we? What they need at the DOI is an A-team in an old American van or whatever that can go out and can do those jobs, you know, not get involved in anything else at all, just go out and rectify things like that. A sunken grid, they can do that in an hour probably. I expect that they probably do have people doing that already, maybe not in an American van. But you know, I think you've got to be careful sometimes not to second guess people, and I expect that it's like most things in the island, it's prioritised, and the fact that there's a sunken grid on a road that not many people use isn't really high on the priority list. But I thought it made sense what Ray Harmer was saying about, you know, we need to look after the stuff that we've got a bit better rather than waiting until it goes horribly wrong and then having to fix it. That makes sense to me. How about you? Get in touch and tell me. Word of the day, Stu. How about boondoggle, an unnecessary, wasteful or fraudulent project? The Slock springs to mind. That from David H. Thank you. I like the idea of a word for the day, and I've seen boondoggle a couple of times recently and wasn't sure what it was, so I am indebted to you, David. Hey boy, it's not rocket science. Is that what they'll do to the prom? Put a million cones down, says G. No, they're going to do the prom. They've done a good job on the northern half, so the bit down Loch Prom and as far as the bottom of Broadway, a temporary fix, I think he's probably going to be great. What's this? Afternoon Stew. Problem with something in government these days is they need a man with loads of letters, God knows whatever else to tell a man who's been doing it all his life how and when to do it. Get rid of the man and the job will get done. That from Gary in Ramsey. Yeah, power to the workers. That was funny, Stu. A DOI A-team. Have you seen some of the boys on the DOI? Half of them need to be on life support. That's unfair. And, you know, leaning on a shovel doesn't mean necessarily that they're not healthy. I'll edit this one slightly. Had to call out a utility-type company, let's say, out to a problem. Their words after looking at the fault was that they'd call out after they'd been over the tea because that way they'd be on overtime. I don't know why people get paid overtime, to be honest. I mean, you should get the same rate. I mean, certainly get paid for working extra hours, but I don't know why people get paid extra money for working outside normal hours, if it's the sort of job that involves working out of normal hours quite often.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads. Our thanks to everyone who took part in the programme. If you'd like to get involved in the discussion yourself, you can call, text or email between midday and 2 p.m. on weekdays. Or you can get your thoughts to us via Facebook or Twitter using the hashtag MRTalkingHeads. You can listen back to each day's programme in full using the on-demand section of manxradio.com. And if there's anything you think we should be discussing on the programme, why not suggest it by emailing talk@manxradio.com. But that's it for now, so until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being Shaw.
Terms and conditions apply.